do. That's what I was going to say. We'll be recording. Okay, so Jess, it's all yours.
Great, thanks, Darlene. Good morning, folks, and welcome. It's so nice to see some new and some other faces that I recognize already on the screen. I'm really pleased to be here and joining you for this session today. It was an honor to be asked by the GMIST team to come and share a little bit about some of my work and some of my approaches to the work that I'm involved with, both in a professional manner, but also in some volunteer space. So I'm really excited to be here with each of you. So I'll be guiding you through a bit of a session around shifting the narrative, discovering, connecting, and mobilizing for community-driven change. I wanted to start first with a land acknowledgement and recognizing the territory that I'm joining from. So the team that I work with, the Center for Employment Innovation, we operate and I live on the ancestral and unceded territory of Mi'kmaq. We acknowledge the Mi'kmaq people as the original caretakers of this land. I also want to acknowledge the history of forced labor that's impacted African Nova Scotians and persons of African descent that has taken place here. As an organization, we take responsibility for learning and seeking long-term transformation in our relationships with land and labor in this province and commit to supporting Black and Indigenous solidarity. We've spent a lot of time reflecting on what land and labor acknowledgements mean to us, for our team, for our work, the impacts that we have, and what our commitments are for this work. It's really important for us not only to be able to speak the words, but also translate that into action and ensure that we're supporting more equitable practices and doing no harm in our work. I find it's also really important to acknowledge it in this space, given this topic, as Indigenous and Black communities have been discovering, connecting, and mobilizing their strengths and assets for centuries to bring about really important change. As we dive into the session today, as you all know, change is the one constant. There has been monumental and really significant change for good and for bad over the past number of years and decades. There'll be more change coming in the coming months, in the years and decades ahead. And what I hope to do through this session is give you a glimpse of an approach to development that may help to shift the needle on how we create more long-term, sustainable change and really strive towards a future that truly works for all. For the session today, we'll be doing just a bit of an introduction and overview. I will be asking for a quick check-in from folks just to see who's in the room, and I've posted that in the chat, so it'll give you a bit of time to be thinking about that. And then we'll be diving into some community narratives, asset-based community-driven development, some key learning values and principles associated with the work, and start to wrap up with prompting questions, ideas, and concepts before we transition into some Q&A time. So to start, who am I? I think it's really important to situate myself both in the work and as a human here. My name is Jess. My pronouns are she, her. I am a sister, a daughter, a partner, a dog mom, an auntie. I am a nature enthusiast. I love spending time in the outdoors, supporting other women to be more confident, learning different things in the outdoors, whether it's hunting, fishing, trapping. I am very passionate about leadership development, specifically for young people, but as a whole about how we do leadership differently and how we better support people in our lives, as well as community-driven development. I grew up in a very small town, very rural community, where people were so supportive of each other. And I find I owe a lot to my family and the communities I've lived in for helping to shape and constantly refine my worldview. The community specifically that I grew up in also helped instill in me the value of curiosity, the idea that care for one another, connection, relationships are really critical, and that together when communities can come together, they can really bring about change and make a difference. I never had a name for this. It was just the way that our community had worked until I came and worked with the Center for Employment Innovation and started to recognize that there is this whole body of evidence and so many other communities that are doing work in this way. I also think it's really important to acknowledge and recognize that what I'm able to share today is a compilation and contribution from thousands of community members and partners and communities and their efforts. This is not something that we have developed on our own. This is something that through generations people have been doing, and we've just been able to really start to partner with others and see what works in different communities and what we can learn from for our own context. I've had the privilege of learning alongside so many incredible people. Some of those folks are on this call right now as well, contributing to the collective knowledge and wisdom that's informed this type of work. And I always feel that when I learn new approaches, it's likely been shaped by so many hands. We continue to iterate and adapt and find ways that work for each of us in different contexts to best support communities. That also makes it really hard to give attribution for the ideas in this area of work. So this is where I want to start, to acknowledge all of the practitioners, the people, the community members that I've had the opportunity to learn from and work alongside. And I thank them for their wisdom and knowledge and guidance that has helped to shape my own practices, beliefs, and values that you'll see show up in today's session. I work with an incredible team at the Center for Employment Innovation. We're situated at Coady Institute and St. FX University. And as a collective, we strive towards Moses Cody's vision of a full and abundant life for all. This really guides all of our work, regardless of what sector we work in, and encourages us to think and question and rethink the work that we do, specifically as we learn what a full and abundant life means for different people. This work has been grounded in the Antigonish movement, and it's actually one of the reasons that I joined the department to begin with. It's a great example of how community members shed the status quo and decided to leverage their gifts, strengths, and assets to bring about real change, to take ownership over their lives. But these alignment with the community center values have really informed, again, a lot of the work that we've been engaged with over the last 7 years of my team. Over those 7 years, I've had the opportunity to work with incredible people at the Center for Employment Innovation, at Coady, and our partners in community. And as a team, we really believe that communities, organizations, and individuals have the skills and assets to inspire meaningful change, to address local challenges, and to shape a future that truly works for all. We work within a system of employment services, and our role in that is really to support leadership development, to foster best practices and community outreach and engagement, to conduct community-based research, and encourage collaboration throughout the system. We have incredible partners at the Department of Labor, Skills and Immigration, at the province of Nova Scotia, the Nova Scotia Career Development Association, and Nova Scotia Work Centres, who are positioned all across the province, who are really striving to change the way in which people experience employment, supporting people to gain meaningful employment and for workplaces to become more inclusive. And so that's a little bit about who I am and what brings me here. And I think that's an important position for me to be sharing, so that you know the why and the how and what informs my position as I'm coming in here, which may differ for everyone in the space to be taking away. But I always like to start a little bit with just knowing who else is in the room. So I will ask, you're welcome to unmute, but you're also welcome to post in the chat. I'd love to see your name, your pronouns if you're willing to share them, where you're joining from, which could be your organization or your geographic location, and just to be thinking about your own experience with the concept of belonging. So thinking about the last time you felt a sense of belonging. What was it that fostered that sense of belonging? So if I used an example, mine would be, my name is Jess, my pronouns are she, her. I'm joining from Antigonish, Nova Scotia with the Center for Employment Innovation. And the one or two words for me is thinking about feeling comfortable to express myself is a characteristic of an environment where I feel like I have a sense of belonging. So I'll invite you to either post that in the chat, or if you want to, you can unmute and share that with the group, but I'd love to hear where you're joining from.
Go ahead. My name is Ryan Cooper. My pronouns are elle, she, her. And I'm joining from Southwest Nova Scotia. I work for a consulting company. We're remote. It's called Touriscop. I'm working in tourism. And I guess the two words that I would share are authentic connections. Yeah, that's how I would describe that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Hi, I'm Elaine Shannon, and my pronouns are she, her. And then if we added a list, as you did, Jess, with all the things, I'm a wife, a mother, a daughter, a friend, a community leader, a lover of nature. There's just so many things. And I love the opportunity to be here talking about asset-based community development. I had the opportunity to work with the Fundy Wellness Network, over 10 years ago in St. John, and Jim Deers came from Seattle, Washington, and he taught us about asset-based community development. And since then, I haven't had an opportunity to play in that field, and I'm really excited that this is happening locally and that we don't have to bring people in from Seattle, Washington. So I guess so my two words would be joy that that's happening, that we have people here in our own region, and the connections, the authentic local connections. So I think Jim sort of lit a little fire for a lot of people when he came to the because I know he was around the entire region, and now we've ignited that flame. So glad.
Thanks, Elaine.
Hi, I'm Wendy Marr, and I'm joining from Centerville, New Brunswick, where I'm employed with the Regional Service Commission, Western Valley Regional Service Commission, as Community Development Coordinator. I've been in this role for a little over a year, so I'm still learning. I'm like a sponge, trying to learn more and more about asset-based community development, and I like that community-led development that you put in there. My pronouns are she and her. And as far as fostering a sense of belonging, I believe that in places where I'm able to be my authentic self and everyone else is being their authentic selves and there's mutual respect for one another, that's when I feel like I belong the most. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
I can go next. I'm Tammy Lossing. We actually have, I'm in Rocky Harbor right now, and we strive to have 6 months in Rocky Harbor of the year, and we actually are in Minnesota and trying to immigrate to Canada. And this is exactly what I'm about. I was very much, it's just really personal. I was raised in a way that people were marginalized, and I've seen it my whole life through their political beliefs and religious beliefs, and whatever I can do for to repair some of that, because I have been on the inside of that and seen how terrible and wrong and it was harmful it can be. So, oh, and my pronouns are she and her.
Thanks, Tammy. Thanks for sharing.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dara. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the Communications and Development Specialist with the Town of Heartland, and I'm joining from the Town of Heartland, which is the home of the longest covered bridge in the world. The things that I would say, or the two words I would say that fosters a sense of belonging for me, would be feeling comfortable and welcome in my community.
Thanks, Michelle.
I can go next. Nancy Belleville-Poitier. I am coming to you from the Campbellton area in northern New Brunswick. I work for the Campbellton Regional Community. My pronouns are her, she. In regards to fostering a sense of belongings, I agree with a lot of people saying that authenticity, the connection, and also the pride that the community has as an effect also.
Thanks, Nancy.
I can go next if nobody else is going to go ahead of me. My name is Rose Arsenault, and I go by she, her, L. I am recently hired as the Regional Tourism Coordinator for Fredericton Capital Region. So when I think of sense of belonging, I think of when I attend the Garrison Night Market and all of the multicultural vendors. And when I play tennis in our Abney Family Tennis Center, and I see all of the kids from the multicultural community, and when I see tournaments in that event, and these children who have immigrated to Fredericton who are now excelling and doing well, so that really gives me that sense of belonging.
Thanks, Rose. Anyone else want to unmute and share?
Yeah, I'll share.
My name is,
Go ahead.
my name is Jill Larkham. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm joining from Goose Bay in Labrador. And for me, I work with the Nunavut government in tourism, and one of the sense of belongings I have is I can work with many community stakeholders to develop tourism while we're helping to preserve our rich culture and history.
Thanks, Jill.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jen Nichols. I'm calling in from Shivery, Nova Scotia. My pronouns are she, her, or they. A couple of words belonging to me. I think the most important things are connection and safety.
Hi, I can go next if that's okay. My name's Robin Warren. I'm coming from Grand Falls, Windsor, Newfoundland and Labrador. I work with the Grand Falls Windsor Heritage Center. And 2 words for me would be openness and one.
Sorry, Robin, what was that second? Openness and?
One.
Thank you. Thanks, Robin. And we do have a few check-ins in the chat too, so I'll just read those out. We have Elaine, so many pronouns, she, her, daughter, wife, mom, chamber vice president. I live in St. Martin's Bay, New Brunswick. 2013, 2014, Jim Deers visited our province and brought the concept of ABCD, and I'm excited that we have people locally who will continue to light the flame. My words are joy and connection. We also have Lori, who shared that their mic isn't working, joining from Plasters Rock, the district of Tobique Valley. I hope I said that right. Pronouns she, her, community, pride, and mutual respect. Else want to share either in the chat or unmute to share?
I'm Darlene Hines, and I'm the logistic manager here with GMIST this morning. I live in Rocky Harbour, hoping to meet Tammy someday. And I am in Halifax right now doing another course. My sense of pride my words would be pride and excitement.
Thanks, Dan. Anyone else want to share? Okay. Well, and if you didn't get to and you want to a little later, feel free to post in the chat. Thank you for going through that. I really believe that anytime we convene in space, whether it's virtual or in person, it gives us an opportunity for new connections and new relationships and new possibilities. And every group that comes together is unique and contributes something special. So when we change the way that we connect, and even just starting with knowing who's here, what's going on, where are you coming from, it can really change the possibilities exist on both small and large scales. So thank you so much for checking in. So we are going to dive right in. For some of the familiar faces, you may have heard this before, so I'll ask you to be mindful of how you're engaging with this piece, but we are going to be reading through 2 community narratives. And as I do so, I'll invite you to feel free to close your eyes. You can turn your Zoom video off or soften your gaze. I'll invite you to listen to the description. And as you listen through the description, I want you to picture, as a resident of this community, what do you feel like what would you feel that it would feel like to live in this community? And once I finish reading the description, or as I go through, you're welcome to post in the chat. I'll ask for just a few initial thoughts from the group about what it would feel like, or what you think it would feel like to live in the community. Folks can do that a number of ways. We can post in the chat if at any point through the narrative you want to share something. You can also use the annotate function on Zoom. So there should be a little pencil on your screen. You can click that. There's a text box, and you can put a text box right on the screen that others would be able to see. So feel free to close your eyes, turn your Zoom off, and we will jump right in. Community 1 is a small rural community located 10 kilometers off the Trans-Canada Highway in northeastern Nova Scotia. The community's location means that there are no quote-unquote drive-by or tourist traffic. Proximity to a much larger town has meant that over time, a number of once vibrant local businesses gradually died off as more residents today do their shopping in a nearby town. Major shifts in agricultural and forest product sectors have led to the number of farms in the community being reduced to from more than 20 to half a dozen. The closing of a regional pulp and paper plant has lessened the demand for wood, affecting many local contractors. The most recent casualty in the forest product sector was a local hardwood flooring plant that employed close to a dozen people closing. Community 1 has an aging population. Most young people must leave not only the community but the province to find gainful employment. Others are not interested in taking over family farms or wood contracting businesses and are drawn by the bright lights and opportunities in the big city. One of the most significant consequences of young people leaving the community is that many of the older residents that form the backbone of the volunteer work that helps sustain the community life are burning out, and they're worried that no one will be able to fill these critical roles. A few new families that have moved into the area are at the stage of life where they're caring for small children and simply don't have the time to get involved in community activities. One of the biggest issues in the community currently is the lack of paved sidewalks on the main road. Many of the community seniors are now afraid to walk along the main road, which makes getting around the community quite difficult. So at this point, if you want to turn your cameras back on, what do you think it would feel like to live in Community One? What are some of the feelings or emotions that surfaced as you heard that narrative? And again, you can post them in the chat or just a quick unmute, 1 or 2 words. What do you think it would feel like? Isolating, restrictive. Any other thoughts about what it would feel like? Hopeless? Sense of abandonment? Any other initial thoughts on what it might feel like to live in this community? Okay. So I'll invite you to do the same thing, and I'm going to read the second community narrative. So as we read through, be thinking about what it might feel like to live in this community. And I do see there's one other post too, worried about day-to-day, safety, being able to take care of yourself. Thanks. Worrying for the future. Yeah. Okay. Community number 2. Community number 2 has been transitioning from a rural agricultural and forest products-based economy to becoming a bedroom community to a nearby university. Unlike many similar-sized rural communities in the region, Community 2 boasts significant local infrastructure. While many communities have lost local institutions, Community 2 has managed to maintain the following: a credit union branch, a post office, a church, a small elementary school with playground equipment, a baseball field, a soccer field, a pond for hockey and skating in the winter, and a convenience store with both gas pumps and a vendor's license for selling alcohol. After a fire 45 years ago, the community built its own fire hall. More than 30 years ago, volunteers in the community pooled their skills, labor, equipment, and materials and built both a curling rink and a community center themselves without any government money. They fundraised by selling $1,000 shares in the rink to hundreds of residents, and the now community-owned rink hosts several leagues, competitions, and events. The community center is now the largest such rural facility in the region and covers its maintenance costs by hosting large dances. It also has a special room for seniors to play cards and socialize. More recently, the community organized to build a 16-room senior housing facility with only 25% of the money coming from government. There's a long history in this community of people coming together in voluntary associations to help others in community and around the world. Community 2 has more than 20 local voluntary and service organizations, including the oldest and one of the largest 4-H clubs in the province. One of the most central to civic life is the Catholic Church, which was where post-World War II immigrants found it easiest to make friends with neighbors. However, when the parish hall needed replacing, the parish council decided to join with other associations to build a more inclusive community center. For more than 2 decades, one of the community associations has raised money locally to support the building of water wells in communities all around the world. Most recently, a group organized to also bring 2 Syrian families to the community. Several years back, community members created an association of associations to ensure coordination between all voluntary and service groups in the community. They created a website and an updated calendar of events and regular community newsletter. Community 2 was one of the first communities in Nova Scotia to be awarded the Lieutenant Governor's Community Spirit Award. Such eternal recognition was appreciated by the community, but local residents are even more proud that the cornerstone of the community center doesn't bear the name of a local politician who provided the funds. Instead, it simply reads community spirit. So I'll welcome you to turn your cameras back on if you'd like. What do you think it would feel like to live in community too? And again, you can unmute or you can post right in the chat. What are some feelings that arose? I see hope, rejuvenation, celebration. Any other feelings? Feel connected, living in community too? Excited to get involved, connected. Oh, Jen. Possibilitarian, love that. Connection. Okay. Pride, inspiration, confidence. So if you had to choose, if you're moving, you had to choose between these two communities, what community would you choose to live in? See some twos popping up. There is community one though. Okay. Well, this example really exemplifies how the power of our stories and the stories that we tell can have such a significant impact on the way that we perceive each other and perceive our communities. Most folks have listed here that they would prefer to live in community too. Some folks are feeling a sense of connection with community one. The fact of the matter here is that this is actually the same community. So it's one narrative shared from the perspective of just a purely deficit lens and another shared from a strengths-based lens. And it's a real community of St. Andrews, Nova Scotia, just up the road from Antigonish. They have for the past 200 years been taking charge of their own development. And both of these stories are true. They both have aspects that are important in the work, but it certainly paints a picture very differently when we only look at one side of the coin. It's a great example of how communities have fostered intergenerational leadership and inclusiveness and have been able to leverage their gifts, their skills, and their assets to strengthen their community and collective well-being. So I thought it was a great one to be able to get us started so that we could, just clearing drawings, so that we could be able to jump into this conversation around asset-based and citizen-driven work. I won't go too deeply into the story of St. Andrews. You've got a picture of it through that narrative. I have included a link here on the screen that does outline, it's about a 20-minute story of some of the work they've done over the past 200 years to really be in the driver's seat of their own development. And so again, what this exercise helps us demonstrate is the power of our perspective. You know, in every individual, in every community, whether we're in or part of a community or if we're an external organization, if we look for the things that are wrong, the needs, the problems, the deficits, we will find them. At the same token, if we look for the strengths and the assets and where there is already energy in the community or where there's examples of folks locally who are actively engaged to make their communities better, we can also find those stories. So it's important for us as we think about shifting the narrative to understand what are the stories we're telling ourselves? What are the labels we're giving to our work and to our community? What is the impact that we might be having by telling stories in a certain way or telling portions of the stories? And this is really critical as we start to think about how do we shift the narrative? Because when we do shift, we can have much more powerful and sustained impact. Just like an analogy of this glass. Is it half full? Is it half empty? How would you see it now? The truth, of course, is that it's both, and it's really important to tell the whole picture. Communities are like this glass. They all have problems and needs and deficits, but they also always have strengths and gifts and skills and assets that they can contribute. The question for us to think about is whether we're within a community or outside of a community looking to support. If you really want to get people passionate and energized and contributing to making a difference, Is it more effective to start with what's wrong or what's going really strongly in a community? And in our work, we really propose, and through what we've learned alongside communities in the past number of decades, is that when you start with what people are proud of in their community and what they're already doing to make communities better, you can build more success to be able to address the things that are challenging or what needs to be addressed within the community. And the St. Andrews story is a great example of the community for over 200 years has taken charge of their development, where they've discovered their skills and assets and strengths and gifts, where they found ways to connect those strengths and assets and gifts together to see what might be possible as a collective rather than individuals, and how they might be able to mobilize them into creating significant impact, building a rank, building a community center with no outside support, with really folks who are passionate about wanting this to happen, building trails and recreational opportunities, creating services that enhance their quality of life and well-being. And at the core, building deeper relationships, creating senses of belonging and agency that they believe that as a community, they can make a difference, and they have. And all of that was possible based on the conditions and the environment and the context that was St. Andrews. Now, this is a great example of a type of development that we call asset-based, citizen-driven, or citizen-led, or community development. It's a way of thinking about development differently and being conscious of the impacts that we have when we reframe the narrative and choose a different starting place. So with ABCD, it's a way of thinking about community, and it's as much about the process as it is about the outcomes. ABCD focuses on strengths and assets rather than problems and needs. Now, it doesn't ignore the problems and needs, but it shifts the starting place to say, what is it that we have that we could use to make a difference, to then also address the problems and needs that do exist. ABCD identifies and mobilizes community and individual skills and passions and assets. It supports an inclusive community process with diversity and inclusion at its core. Most importantly, though, among all the assets that could exist, from stories and skills and experience, associations and networks, local institutions, financial resources, physical assets, culture, the most important asset is agency, or the willingness or the capacity to act. There are self-mobilizing communities and examples all across the world. The story from St. Andrews is not unique. We've worked with hundreds of community members and leaders across the world. And each one of them, although sometimes it can take some time thinking about it, has been able to identify where this type of self-mobilization development is already happening, both large and small. And it allows people to really start building on, okay, we've seen this work, large or small. How can we continue to get more of this good work? What is it that we can do together? And as that agency and passion and excitement continues to build, communities start to see more and more success. We have a few partners in our work, the Yetta Institute, others across the world, but one of the areas in one of the recent community building guidebooks they've created is this idea of that there are 3 drivers of asset-based, citizen-driven, or community-driven development. The first one is hope. How do we help other possibilities emerge? The second one is care. How can we discover what people care enough about to act on? And the third is relationships. You know, we've noted through our check-in the importance of belonging, about connection, mutual respect, authenticity, feeling of comfortable and welcome, senses of pride, seeing people flourish and be connected, rich cultures, safety, openness, mutual respect, excitement. Building and strengthening these relationships is key to action and key to creating this sense of belonging where people do feel like they can engage and be a part of this change. And the story of St. Andrews is not unique. And it doesn't have to be this large scale. You know, they were able to do some incredible things with 200 years of experience of building up that agency and excitement. As another example, I moved to Antigonish just about 3 years ago. And in our first summer here, one of the neighbors from up the road dropped off a cleanup day flyer in our mailbox. They chose a random day, a time in the middle of the day that they thought would work for most folks. And they invited all the road residents to come out with gloves and a trash bag to help clean up the trash that had accumulated on the streets. They maintained a large dumpster on their property, and then they invited everyone to be able to discard the trash bags there once they were complete, so folks didn't have to worry about having trash hang around at their house. And before COVID, they used to invite all the neighbors on the road to be able to come for a community potluck where folks would bring food and share in a meal together and help to build and deepen relationships and connections. That's a great example of ABCD that didn't take a ton in terms of resources. Most people could participate with the things that they likely already had in their house, and encourage people to take ownership over the status of our part of community rather than waiting for someone else, the town or the county, to come and do that cleanup. But the agency was a critical part. And as we think about all of these stories, there's lots that we can draw from. On the screen, I have an ebook site where we invite people to come and share their stories of the ABCD, and there's a number of really great global examples in there. But you can see how with every initiative, large or small, the community continues to build the confidence to act, to bring about change. And when communities are in the driver's seat of that change, identifying how they want to go about it, what the skills and assets are, where they want to focus their time and energy, we ultimately start to see all those community relationships strengthen. We see our sense of belonging strengthen, but we also see these long-term sustainable impacts that often are hard to get or hard to get to with external organizations. But unfortunately, when we think about shifting the narrative and we think about discovering, connecting, and mobilizing, there is no blueprint. There is no one way for this to happen. There are tons of tools and approaches and ideas about how to go about this, but all of it is context specific to you, in your community, in your workplace. Every community is different context, different situation, different set of beliefs or constraints and opportunities. Every community has gifts and wisdom, passion and excitement and opportunities. How does change happen in your community? What are the great things that are already happening, and how can we leverage more of that? It's really important in this work that we look at each space, each idea, each possibility as unique to those communities to understand, where is community at this point? How do they meet people where they are? How do they identify, given their unique situation, how they might begin to discover what people care enough about to act on? How we connect the skills and assets that people have, and how we can mobilize those assets for change. What helps people feel a sense of belonging is also going to differ. So understanding these pieces is really critical. I really love this quote from a colleague across the pond, Peter Kenyon. People support what they help to create. They want to make it happen. And this is a really critical learning, thinking about whether you're thinking community work or work from an institution or an association. If we know that people want to support the things they help to create and they're passionate to do that, how do we create more space for that? Again, that process piece, how people are involved and engaged, is just as important as the outcome. And how do we leverage all of this to be able to create more equitable and sustainable changes to help create a future that really works for all? And so I want to share with you, although there is no blueprint, some examples from around the world about how people in their own context have started to outline their values, their principles, the things that help them make decisions that can best support their communities. The first is more of an international standard that has been recently developed through connection with hundreds of community development practitioners and communities across the world. And those standards that they've come up with in terms of really good community development practice are that you have to identify and put your values into practice. You need to be able to name them. What are the values of your work, and how do they help support transparency and action? How do they engage with communities? How do we ensure that planning is participatory and not just imposed on different groups or communities? How do we organize for change and learn for change? How do we ensure that we're promoting diversity and inclusion throughout all of our works at every aspect from the start to the finish? How do we build in distributed leadership and infrastructure? And how do we develop and improve policies and practice? Different communities have created their own principles or values that are important, that have allowed them to foster more asset-based, community-led or community-driven development. This first one on the screen is from colleagues here at Coady Institute who work primarily with Indigenous communities across Turtle Island. And in all of the stories of ABCD or community-led development, there are a number of important principles that have arisen. Every Indigenous person and community has gifts within. Start with what we already have. It starts with spirit. Relationships and connections are at the center. Asking, listening, and sharing our stories is key. Indigenous leaders involve others, and decision-making, future generations, and shared vision are all important places to be focusing on. Bristol City Council in the UK uses this template to share their values and principles. And they're saying, in my neighborhood, everyone is welcome. We share our stories, we have a voice, and we take action. We also make connections across the neighborhood. We find people with interests, skills, or passions. We connect people with shared interests. We connect with local assets, and we support people to take action. So again, outlining the values and principles that guide their work. The ABCD Institute out of the USA has a number of values that they have articulated. It starts with gifts, build relationships for mutual support, value the small, nurture citizen-led action, work for equity and justice, believe in possibility, lead by stepping back, and include everyone. The Yetta Institute out of Australia has named theirs Deadly ABCD, deadly in this case meaning awesome. They have community at the center, surrounded by place-based local leadership, strengths focus, culturally safe, participatory learning, and building relationships, all encompassed by being community owned and led, stories and history and lore and culture. And the final example I'll share is from the 5 and 2 network out of Western Canada, and they've developed their community-centered development principles, which talk about the importance of the positive principle, or focusing in on the strengths instead of the needs and deficiencies. Wholeness, ensuring everyone is included in the community building process. Ownership, so ensuring that there's power and ownership that the community has to be able to see their vision of projects move forward. The organic principle that things have to arise or grow within the community as it is. A wonder principle of really what is possible. Momentum, trying to continue with the energy and excitement that's already there and moving. Relationships, how important they are, the strong dynamics and linkages between people and systems, and transformation about how we shift to these new paradigms. So in all of those examples, people have taken their context and figured out what is it that really helps to foster ABCD in our specific place. And for the most part, ABCD is really a paradigm shift. If we want to see sustainable change and impact, we have to re-examine how we go about our work, how we paint pictures of communities, how decisions are made, and who's involved. Not only is this purely for community-led work, the team that I work with is situated within an institution, within a service delivery system, so lots of levels here. But we use principles of ABCD and our values all the time to ensure the community is centered in our work, centered in our decision-making. They're authentically engaged in the process. We provide clear and transparency about where they're able to make an influence or where not. And whenever possible, we create spaces for the communities to be leading the charge with our support. We've done this through community advisory groups, first voice research and project leadership, social innovation labs, providing community funds for communities to lead transformation in other ways. And all of these learnings can really be applied to all aspects just to try and help create a more just and equitable processes and policies and communities as a whole. So as we start to wrap up the presentation piece of this, I have a few prompts that I want folks to be thinking about as you move forward. How might you, in your context, whether it's as an individual in community, as in community and relationship to others, within an organization or an association or an institution or government, how might you discover the skills and assets that exist for yourself and for others around you? What are the ways you might be able to connect those skills and assets to see all the possibilities that could exist given what you have? And how might you then mobilize that into real sustainable change? What could that look like? How might you have really intentional learning conversations? By building more connections, we can start to discover what people care enough about to act on. When we see that meaningful action, it continues to build more connections. And we have this really wonderful cycle of building from success to success. And oftentimes there's also not success, but there's so many things that we can learn from that about what we might want to do differently. But how can we continue to be involved in this process and really ground ourselves in prioritizing community voices and experiences? And it doesn't always have to be this massive undertaking. So we like to talk a little bit about lower and higher hanging fruit. Lower hanging fruit being, what is it that you could do right now with things that you have that would require minimal intervention within a short time frame that you could then build on to show people what's possible when people can come together and act. And then as that develops, you can also choose those higher hanging fruit, things that may require additional resources or time, or might require some additional support from external. And the last piece as we think about asset-based community-driven development is this idea of the 3 lanes. Whether you're an individual or a community member or from an organization or institution or government, what is it that communities can do for themselves? And how are they able to identify, or we as community members able to identify that? Once we're able to identify what we can do and do really well, then what can the community do with the support of others? How do they identify that? What's important to them to have leverage support from other folks? And finally, the 3rd lane, what does community want government or institutions to do? What is it that they feel is the responsibility of government that lies outside of the community individuals themselves? And so thinking about these different lanes and where you might fit as an individual or from an organization, it's really important to be asking these really intentional questions about who's doing the work? Are we the right people? Who needs to be involved if they're not already involved? And I like to just end with this quote from Grace Lee Boggs: movements are born of critical connections rather than critical mass. So how do we create more critical connections in our work, in our lives, in the ways that we connect with each other to build towards that critical mass that can help take us to more sustainable change? And again, this is just a bit of a glimpse in terms of some of our work around discovering, connecting, and mobilizing community-driven initiatives. At the Coady Institute, we have a number of programs that are ongoing throughout the year, both virtual and in person. I've listed a few of them on the screen. I think a few applications closed this week, so leadership for young professionals, asset-based and community-led development. We're also running a 2nd round of Activate alongside the GMIST partners. Activating community tourism, which I think the application closes this week as well, but Darlene might be able to speak to that. But there are lots of ways to continue to get involved. These are great opportunities to be able to learn alongside some incredible folks for the Activate program across Atlantic Canada, for some of the other programs across the world, to see what people are doing and how they're working to change the narrative and shift the way that development is done so that we can create a more just and inclusive world moving forward. So thank you for engaging today, for being a part of this session, and for engaging in some of the pieces that we had throughout the piece. I think this is where I'll stop. We'll transition over to any questions or things that are coming up that folks may want to chat about. I'll take the screen down so I can actually get a chance to see all of you. But thank you so much. And thank you to the GMIST team for inviting me to share a little bit here. And thank you to everyone who's been a part of my learning journey that's been able to bring me to this space in my work at this point. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Jess. It will take a few minutes if anyone has any questions or everything, but I just want to remind everyone that at the end of the session here, there will be a short survey that will pop up. If you could just take a minute to help us out with that, that would be awesome. So is there any more questions for Jess?
I don't have a question. Just thanks, Jess. You're probably surprised to see me here because I've spent the last year learning about asset-based community development. And the reason I signed up for this today is because I'm actually having trouble stepping back from that year's worth of knowledge to explain it in an introductory level to people in my community. So that's why I was here, and this is great. Good reminders of kind of where to start when talking about this, but I also wanted to put a plug in for Activate. If any of you had been considering applying for that program, it's amazing. And it's really been significantly impactful for me. So I just wanted to put that play. If you don't know what it is, look it up. It is it's really a wonderful program. And I think it's going to be even better this year than it was last year. And we didn't think that was possible. So yeah, take a look.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. Anyone who would like to check that out, our website is gmist.ca, and you can get all the information on all of our courses on that website.
Thanks, Jen. And it's always good to see some friendly faces. But to your point, it can be really difficult to describe ABCD. And in our work with the Center for Employment Innovation, often we don't. Often it's just the changing the way that we work with people. And then later, sometimes explaining kind of the concept and the grounding and all of those pieces, but being really transparent around like, what are our values, or co-creating any new project we start with different partners, we co-create the values. What's important to us? How do we make decisions? Whose voice is really important in making those decisions? You know, whose voice may outweigh others depending on what the context is. But yeah, a lot of the times we dive into the work and thinking about what is something that you want to do or that you have excitement to do, or what are some things that you think could make a difference in our community? So really going through the process without necessarily naming it. And I say this often, and it could just be me too, but you know, this is work that I had said I've been involved with for almost my entire life, I would say, never had a name for it. It was just the way in which my communities had worked together and the things that we had done. And it wasn't until I came and worked with the Cody Institute and the Center for Employment Innovation that I realized, oh, there's a name for this. Like, people are studying this and trying to understand all these common threads. So yeah, sometimes it can be, how do you do the work? Do you have to put a label on it? The other thing that sometimes we challenge some of the folks in our courses to look at is, how would you describe ABCD to a 7-year-old? Like, how would you describe it to, you know, children that you're working with? And, you know, how do you put it in a way that anyone can understand? Like, for us, literacy level, any of those types of things, at its core, what is it? And folks really identified a lot of those pieces early on in terms of what creates a sense of belonging. And isn't that what really we're trying to do? How do you create a sense of belonging and ownership over change in community and allowing people to make that change for themselves? And then be able to say, okay, here's where we need additional support or help from others. So thanks for that, Jen. Any other questions or thoughts or things that folks just want to share, whether it's their own experiences or anything you think might be important for the group to hear? Well, and maybe one of the things I'll leave you folks with, I always start any of the ABCD courses I've ever taught with the disclaimer of, you know, I am not an expert. There are lots of things that I know or have experienced. I'm an expert in my context, in my situations, in the work that I've done. But every opportunity to connect in those courses, I learn something new from folks in the room. I'm always taking away new things and shifting based on questions that come up or ideas or things that folks are sharing that they've done in their own communities. And I think that's really the beauty of asset-based citizen-driven development, is that there is no blueprint, and there's so much we can learn from other people so long as we're open to that. And so I'm always really appreciative of the courses I've been able to teach, because every time I walk away, basically, you know, feeling like I've learned as much as I think folks may have in the room, because I've heard from other people in their own experiences, and that's shifted. Every time I've facilitated, I've shifted my practice afterwards and thought about doing things differently, and I'm so grateful for that opportunity. So, you know, this is another space. There are tons of resources out there. There's tons of organizations and communities doing this, whether they call it ABCD or not. But to think about, what do you do in your own life, in your own context that aligns with this? Where are areas that you want to grow a little bit more, or try something new, or see if communities are open to be able to do things a little bit differently? So I always like to share that, because there's a lot we can learn from each other in every single space we're in, and I'm really appreciative of that for everyone.
Thank you so much, Jess. And thank you all for coming today. It was awesome seeing familiar faces and getting to meet other people that I haven't seen before. So we just want to thank you all for signing up today. Don't forget the survey. Bye, everyone.
Thanks all. Have a good day.